Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome to Living the Solution with Dr. Elena George. Today I have one of my favorite guests on, someone who's like-minded, who is out on the front lines and doing what we do as physicians, and that means taking care of our patients and not letting anything get in the way. So we're going to have a conversation today with Dr. Ralph LaGuardia. He's a triple specialized physician in internal medicine, geriatrics, and bariatrics. He's also the author of the Doomsday Book of Medicine, the Bible of Alternative Medicine, and Infected: Secrets from the Medical Underground. He's like-minded, and today we're going to have a conversation about how we stay healthy. Today we're going to talk about water. And, I ask people, Dr. Ralph, in my practice every day, how much water they drink a day. And usually it's not very much. It's more soft drinks, coffee, but not really water. And I think we take water for granted, as if the quality is equal no matter if we buy bottled or if we use tap and all the filters that we see on TV. And I wanted to touch base with you and really tease out the importance of water, and really, are they all the same? So, one, welcome and Happy New Year.
You too.
And I'd like to start off with, why is water important?
Well, there's two ways your body can excrete waste. Well, three ways. You can exhale it to carbon dioxide. You can urinate it out. That's all the water-soluble things. They get dissolved in your body, sent to your kidneys, and you excrete them that way. Or you can defecate them that way. The vast majority of the stuff we excrete is via our kidneys. Hence the necessity for water. Because if you don't maintain adequate hydration and you get dehydrated, that cuts down the volume of blood delivered to your kidneys to be filtered. Consequently, the waste build up in your blood. And so, hydration is a perennial problem in my practice. I would say 90% of the people are not hydrated adequately, especially the elderly. Because as you know, as you get older, your thirst mechanism declines, which means that you don't feel thirsty. I remember when my mom was alive, I would stay with her all day. She would have coffee in the morning, and that would be it. I'd say, "Ma, you have to drink some water." I drank coffee. I said, "That's a diuretic." I said, it couldn't be worse. And so what I do with my patients, I found this to be very useful, because they're never sure how much they should drink. And, they tried the 8 glasses. They tried different things. I use different methods, but one of the things I tell them is to use your tongue as a barometer. If your tongue looks dry, it's not shiny and wet, you're dehydrated. And so that I've started that a few years ago, and that's proved to be immensely helpful, because it gives people immediately a way to look in the mirror and go, "Oh, he's right, I have to drink some more." So that's worked out very well. A couple of my friends have adopted it for their practices as well. But that's very useful, because water is key for life. There's the rule of threes for survival. You can last 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and depending on your weight, 3 weeks without food. There's also a fourth rule called the rule of shelter. In a harsh environment, you only live 3 hours without shelter. But so the water, you can see water is essential for life. It's essential for all the processes we have. In these times of uncertain times that we have, having the ability to process your own water and purify it is essential. That's why I have a Substack column called The Medical Underground on Substack, and I write articles every week about different things. One of the articles I wrote a few months ago was very well received on water, because people are confused about what to do with it. There's this misconception that if it's clear looking, it's okay, which is totally false. And so mostly the filtration processes that I've taught people to do, and I wrote about in an article, was ways to reprocess water. Even from your home, there's 2 types of wastewater from your house. It's called gray water and black water. Black water comes from your toilet, the bathroom sinks, things like that. Gray water comes more from your shower and a wash machine and things like that. Gray water is easier to filtrate and use, so you can process it use it for drinking again. But that always involves a two-step almost always involves a two-step process. One step is filtration of the water, and the other step is sterilization. And that's the part that people get confused on. They think filtration's fine, where it's wrong, because you could have parasites in there, viruses, bacteria, different things that aren't visually evident by looking at them, and it'll still be quite dangerous, the water. Another thing that I wrote an article about a few weeks ago was microplastics. People don't realize the horror of microplastics. And it's just coming to the forefront now with microplastics. There is plastic contamination everywhere. They're even finding it in Antarctica and the Arctic from coming down with rain. There's plastic everywhere. This blew my mind. The average American eats 5 grams of plastic a week ingested into their body. That's the size of a credit card every week. And, you see people all day with plastic water bottles sucking this stuff down, and it just pours plastic into the water. And so, if you can get away from plastics in your house, you're doing yourself a huge favor. After I researched this article, I switched our entire house. We have no more plastic anything. Tupperware, anything. We made it all glass. I even changed the straws I drink in the office. I drink, water out of the glass. I put it in glasses instead of plastic cups, and I put glass straws in it just to try to limit my intake of it, because unbelievably, it's crossing the blood-brain barrier. It's in all the organs. They're finding it high levels of it in the testes and the ovaries of reproductive age adults. And we're just starting to realize the consequences of this. And I think as time goes on, this is going to be a major, major problem. We're plasticizing ourselves. I mean, we're so many ways we're poisoning ourselves, not to mention the pollution and all the chemicals in the food and the water. That's why I like Robert Kennedy coming in. I'm not a big fan of him except for this stuff. I mean, I love it with the vaccines and with the cleaning up the way we grow food and stuff. This industrial farming has just exposed us to massive amounts of chemicals, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and especially Roundup. Roundup is a real problem because it's getting in everything. It's unfortunately water soluble, and so it evaporates and comes down in the rain, and we're all being poisoned by that. And then we have on top of it, they've decided to go 5G, and the whole planet's being irradiated. So you wonder what the end game is here. But God, we're getting hit on so many levels, making it so difficult for people to maintain their health. So if you can, one of the best things you can do is get rid of these plastic bottles. Do not do it, because it's just, especially the softer they are, the worse they are. It's leaving more and more plastic in the water itself. And so that would behoove you a lot and your listeners to switch to that right away and read the article. It lays out what you can do in ways to mitigate that and try to cut down your exposure. And so, there's getting back to cleaning water, there's several ways to do it. Quite simple. There is one method. You get a 5-gallon bucket and you layer it. The first you put like old clothes on the top. Second layer is gravel. The third layer is sand, and the fourth layer is activated charcoal, followed by another layer of cloth so no charcoal gets into the water. And you pour water in the top of it, and by the time it comes out the bottom, the shirt, believe it or not, picks up a lot of the large particles and filters them out. The gravel, then lesser sized ones, and the sand, finally very small ones. But when you get to activated charcoal, that's where the magic happens. Activated charcoal is, you can buy it very cheap. I would suggest stocking up on a lot of it. It's a great thing to have. You can filter all kinds of things with it. It's the same thing we use for pool filters, aquarium filters, things like that. And what it does is it doesn't absorb with a B, it adsorbs with a D, meaning adsorption like that is, so if you took the activated charcoal and you filtering it with stuff, if it was absorbing with a B, it would swell. And because it would incorporate it into itself and it would generate a huge volume. It doesn't do that. It adsorbs, meaning it chemically bonds things on the surface. Sort of like writing on a blackboard. The chalk on the blackboard is not being absorbed by the board, it's being adsorbed. There's a chemical reaction between the calcium of the chalk and the board itself that adheres it to it. And this is a similar thing with activated charcoal. And it's wonderful stuff to have because it filters out almost everything. It'll get rid of, depending on the pore size you can use on filters using it, it'll get down to viruses even and remove them from the water. But it'll definitely remove most of the bacteria. A lot of times, if you have one that's, you're doing it yourself at home, I would suggest probably as a safe step, boiling the water once you're done with it. And just to be sure, you're killing off everything that's left. If you boil water, you just have to have it go to what's called a rolling boil. With the whole pan is churning with water. You just do that for 10 minutes and it's fine. And that water will be good for 24 hours before it's recontaminated. And once again, I would put it in a glass bottle and use it that way. But there's other things you can use. There's actually a 3-bucket method where you do the same thing. You just divide it into buckets and put them on top of each other with holes drilled in the bottom. If you want to use a larger volume of water to be filtered that way. And there's commercial things. There's Berkey filters, which are most common. And that's kind of expensive. It's a large metal, looks like a big coffee maker. And you pour the water in the top and it filters it out through 4 filters that have very small micron-sized filters on them filled with activated charcoal. And that, by the time water comes out, it's pretty clean from the bottom of that. And they're several $100s. However, I talk about this in the article, you can do it yourself at home by just buying the filters themselves and drilling half-inch holes in the bottom bucket, connecting the filters in the top bucket, and they'll filter right through. And then you can use it that way. And that's way cheaper than buying the whole Berkey system. But that you could do, that's good for, those filters are good for 6,000 gallons. And they're only,
That's a lot. That's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, you're right. So, I mean, you could go a long time. And, so if you buy 2 sets of filters, you're golden for a long time. And if you don't have activated charcoal, you can make biochar. Biochar is what civilizations did for the most part. Activated charcoal is an industrial process. It's kind of hard to make. Not hard, but it involves more infrastructure. Biochar they used in traditional societies was they would put kind of wood into a vessel and half burn it. At high temperature would burn it, then they would cut off the oxygen to it and it would stop the combustion of it. And you would be left with something similar, not as good, but similar to activated charcoal. So you can make it yourself. And in the article, I teach you how to do that. It's quite simple. It's not a problem. Any questions so far?
No, I mean, it gives us a lot of wiggle room. If things go south, you can actually do this yourself.
Right.
And
It's not difficult at all. I mean, the absolute best way to clean water is to distill it. And what that involves is boiling it and then having it go through a condenser and putting some ice or something around it to cool it. And as the water comes out, it'll condensate on it and fill it up. That water is perfectly pure. That's H2O with nothing in it. And so but that's labor intensive, energy intensive, and most people don't have the beakers and things you would need to do that. But in the article, I mean, I show you how to jerry rig one yourself and how to build a still. You can even make a solar still. I should teach you how to do that too, by using a tarp with some sunlight. You dig a hole in the ground, naturally during the summer, not now, and you put some biomaterial in there that's wet, grass cuttings and plants and things like that. And you put the tarp over it, and the sun heats it up. And it evaporates from that green material. It evaporates onto the underside of the tarp, and then drips into it. You can put a can there with a rock on it to keep it low at one point, and to collect the water from there. That's something you could do in the field if you had to, and that works pretty good. But one of the most effective ways is using ultraviolet light. And we've been doing that for 100 years now, almost, by spraying water in the air. That purifies it. Because there's 3 kinds of ultraviolet light. There's ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, and ultraviolet C. The C is the one that kills pathogens. And so that's a very effective way to do it. And you could do that with a water bottle, a glass bottle, preferably. You just put it in the sun. First, you filter it, because the cleaner it is, the better as far as particulate matter. And you put it in the sun. If it's a sunny day, in 6 hours, it'll be sterile. Just putting it in the sun by itself. On a cloudy day, you'll have to wait 2 days, but it will sterilize it. So that's a quick way. and that even kills COVID-19 in 9 minutes. So it's not it's not hard to do at all. And if you shake the bottle, that's called photooxidation. The oxygen will mix with the water and the sunlight and kill off everything even faster. So there's little tricks to do that I teach you in the article on ways to do it. This way you have more than one way, more than one way to skin the cat, so to speak. You know. What are you gonna say?
That's awesome. And, we have to take our first break, but I want to come back and ask you about two things. One would be, can you drink distilled water? Hold a thought until we come back. And the other is adding hydrogen to the water. Is that a fad or is that really medicinal? So
Okay.
let's take our first break and come back. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Dr. Ralph LaGuardia. And before the break, you were giving an awesome tutorial on the different methods of keeping ourselves healthy, no matter what situation we're in. I can imagine the people who've gone through these hurricanes and, these devastations, they can still have clean water. And these are multiple methods to try to do it or to do it without depending on somebody helping you out. Now,
It's interesting you say that because my article on water filtration, I sent it out to some aid groups, and it went viral. And they used it a lot in North Carolina and the other states that were hit when they were out of water.
wow. Well, that's awesome. So my next question is, in terms of distilled water, I've heard a couple of things. Is it safe to drink? And if so, is it better
Yes.
than, okay, well, expand on that for me.
Yeah, it's very safe to drink. It's just pure H2O. It tastes flat. It doesn't have much of a taste to it. And what you can do is you can add a pinch of salt, sea salt, to if you have a quart of it or a gallon of it. And the other way you can do it is if you have 2 glass containers and one's got this distilled water in it, you could send it from one container into another back and forth. And what that does is it oxygenates the water and makes it doesn't taste stale, it tastes fresher. That and the sea salt works great. And it feels like you're tasting delicious water. But there's absolutely no danger in drinking distilled water. I thought that as a kid too. I think they told us that in grammar school. Don't ever drink distilled water. But I don't know why. That's not true.
Oh, that's great to know. Does it have a medicinal quality to it? Can it go into the lymphatic system, into the intracellular matrix and help flush stuff out, or no?
No. But your body needs it. So your body recognizes it and uses it. But you're really better off with the hardest water you can get, mineral wise, because then you have the benefit of dissolved minerals in it that we're all kind of depleted in, and so that helps a lot. And so yeah, if you use it do it that way, that's why I'm a big proponent of sea salt and things like that, just to get the minerals and trace elements that you need in your diet. Because as you know, from the soils being so depleted, there's with this industrial farming, they're only using NPK fertilizer, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They're not adding back minerals and trace elements, especially iodine. Iodine's one of the biggest ones, and there's a huge iodine deficiency. We used to, at the turn of the century, 100 years ago, in fact, it was the greatest public health coup ever by iodizing salt. Because the further you get from the coasts, the less iodine there is, because it's mostly in seawater and seafood. That's why seafood's so good for you. But once you move inland, the iodine's not there. You get to the Rocky Mountains in the Midwest, there's hardly any iodine in the soil. That was called the goiter belt. Because of that lack of iodine, people developed goiters in their neck, and they all had these swollen necks, and there was an epidemic. And they actually eradicated that using, what do you call it?
Iodized salt.
Iodized salt. And so that was a great public health coup. 2 problems with that, though. A, everyone's on low salt diets now. And B, iodine evaporates. It just doesn't hold well. And so for that reason, if you leave salt out too long, the iodine will evaporate off of it. But iodine is especially important for brain development. You cannot develop the central nervous system in anyone or any man or animal without iodine. This is why animals are always looking for salt licks and things like that. They naturally know to go and get some salt. But the uh, iodine's fascinating. People born with low iodine levels are, as you know, are called cretins. They're mentally retarded. They're short. They're totally deformed. Their brains aren't developed, and they don't live very long. Oddly enough, even though we know that, no one's pushing to supplement iodine, which always blows my mind. Why not? If you know it's not you need it for brain development, and why not give it? The American physicians, for some reason, are fearful of iodine. They have some weird thoughts about iodine causing thyroid storm and these different things. It's just not true, and we can prove that by the Japanese. The Americans eat very little iodine in our diet. The Japanese eat, on average, 23 to 25 milligrams of iodine a day. They have a huge amount of iodine in their diet because of they eat a lot of seafood and a lot of seaweed and things like that they eat. Seaweed's loaded with it. Kelp is what I use to supplement it with my patients because kelp is giant seaweed. There's forests of it off every coast. And kelp, when you harvest that, not only do you get iodine that you need, but you get all the minerals and trace elements you need too. So it's great. It's full of them. It's chock full of them. And so it's great for you, especially the essential amino acids. Those are the ones you get from it. And so that if you're pregnant, it behooves you to take kelp capsule once a day, to even give iodine to your children as they're developing, because they'll still need it as their brain develops and they're in grammar school and things like that. And so I always supplement it in my pregnant patients. I always advise them to do that. The fascinating part is it raises the IQ on 20 points on average. Talking about that, mind-boggling, right?
It is.
Yeah. And where are our public health people? Why aren't they screaming, take iodine? It just always amazed me that they didn't go for that. And when I check patients for iodine deficiency, the vast majority of them are deficient. Adults, I don't do children, so it's adults in my practice. But so it's one of those easy things we can do. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can pick off.
I think we'd be a lot healthier if we just do simple things. I remember when I was a kid, it used to be iodized salt. That went away. It's like brominated now, isn't it?
Yes, that's what you hit on exactly. That's one of the major problems. Bromine is right next to iodine on the periodic table. They're both halogens, and they both have similar properties. And see, we should have paid attention more in high school chemistry, right? It's coming back to haunt us. I thought it was such a waste of time at the time, but chemistry is where it's at. And so what happens is they're using bromine and bromides, and it's very cheap to use them, and they're using them to preserve foods. They're using it as fire retardants in a lot of clothing that we wear. And the amount of bromine we're exposed to is huge. You do that in a time when there's an iodine deficiency, and what happens is fascinating. The body, with a lack of iodine, will take up bromine because it thinks it's iodine. It's close to it, and it fools it into taking it. So when we measure thyroid hormones, there's no way to tell if there's iodine or bromine in there. And so that's why my patients who are hypothyroid, I make them all take two things: iodine in the form of kelp. They can take it in any form they want, but most of them like using kelp. I mean, some use drops and different form pills even. But kelp seems the nicest one because it's organic. Your body recognizes it. In addition to which, it has the essential amino acids I was speaking about, different minerals. So it's a double whammy. So if you do that, you'll displace the bromine in there, and because the iodine that the thyroid needs to make thyroid hormone, there is T4 and T3. The number means the number of iodines attached to the molecule. That's how important it is. We can't count iodine when we name the molecules for the thyroid. T4 is inactive for the most part, and it goes around to the body, and then there's an enzyme called deiodinase enzymes that remove an iodine, and they make T4, T3, which is active. And so those enzymes are dependent on selenium. So for that reason, since I'm a functional medicine doctor, I go back to how things function the best, and I try to provide all of the material your body would need to function optimally. So for my patients with hypothyroidism, I give them selenium and kelp, or a different form of iodine if they like, along with their iodine hormones. And I preferably use NP thyroid or Armour thyroid. I use the natural forms because they contain T4 and T3. And once again, the synthroid stands for synthetic thyroid. I'm not a big fan of synthetic chemicals that we make instead of the natural ones. It always seems to be a disaster.
If you can do it the way nature has set it out to be done, to me, that seems to be the most user friendly and in less side effects, and you can actually fix the problem instead of just treating a symptom, which as a functional medicine doctor, I think that's exactly your wheelhouse. Now, I had a quick question about hydrogen water because there's fads out there where people can buy bottles in order to use UV light and some sort of process, I guess it's electrolysis, to create more hydrogen in the water. Do you know about that? And is that something that you find to be helpful?
I haven't used it much. I know about it. I haven't employed it much in my practice. But there is, there was a product called Active H2, which is hydrogen tablets you can put in. It makes it adds molecular hydrogen to water. And that supposedly has benefits as far as energy production and wellness overall for the body, although I don't know if there's any major studies on it or anything. That's what the manufacturers suggest. And I have some patients who swear by it. But personally, I haven't tried it, so I don't really like to comment on something I don't know that much about.
Got you. And from the standpoint of, can you drink too much water? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
rule of thumb was, your body weight in kilograms per day. And after reading your article, I realized you're looking at the color of your urine too. So if there is no color to it, you kind of overshot. So
Yes.
is that something? Is that a thing that you can drink too much?
Yeah, you can actually die from it. You can, because what happens is if you absorb too much water, you get, it dilutes all your electrolytes. And so you get hyponatremic and you have other problems in there and you can't, um, it causes major heart problems. You'll die from it. But, that's really a long shot. You really have to go out of your way to drink gallons of water a day to do that. And at the same time, have no electrolytes in you or very little. And then that's a problem. I've never seen it in practice. But you read about it in cases and journals and stuff. They talk about it. It could happen. But as I said, I think most people are dehydrated, so it's not a problem. But you're absolutely right. If you look at your urine, it should be ideally a light yellow color. If it's clear, you're drinking too much water. If it's dark yellow, you're not drinking enough. Now, that being said, your morning urine will have a lot more waste in it than other parts of the day, and it might be darker than you would expect. But during the day, if you do it during the day and check your urine, it should be just a light lemon yellow.
Okay, that's good because I really didn't know that, and that's a really good rule of thumb. So most of the time, if you can gauge that, then you can actually feel confident that you don't have to go crazy drinking
Right.
various amounts. So on that note, let's take our second break and come back. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Dr. LaGuardia, and you can go to his website, medicalunderground.substack.com, and there you can find his articles. Actually, you have a really nice way of patients contacting you, right? Where they can actually interact with you and, I guess, pick your brain, right?
Oh yeah, through Substack, I get letters every day. Readers ask me things that they want. Naturally, I don't give them medical advice that about their specific problem because it's a malpractice nightmare. But in general, I give them general advice of what to do for stuff like we're talking about now, that has doesn't establish a physician-patient relationship that some lawyer can crucify me on later. When we're talking about the water, though, there's just a few things I want to mention. If you're using tap water that comes from the city water, not your own well, a lot of it has chlorine in it. And so when you go through the process of boiling and stuff, before you put it in a container, you should vent it for a few minutes just so the chlorine gas evaporates from it. And you can also, in a pinch, and I talk about it in the article, use your pool water if you have a swimming pool. That's a great source of water if you need it in an emergency. And that's really good. That too is good for 24 hours after you boil it, but that has to you can do that, and there's several ways you can do that. There is different things you could add. The actually pool shock, which is calcium hypochlorite. If you add that 10 drops of that or a quarter of a teaspoon of that to a gallon of water, it cleans it rapidly. You could also use betadine, which is iodine, and add it. There's a lot of tablets you can use for water purification, and they all work fine. There's three main types. There's chlorine tablets, iodine, and chlorine dioxide. The iodine and the chlorine work very well, except they don't kill Giardia, so you get giardiasis, and cryptosporidium. These parasites are in the water, are not killed by the other two, only by chlorine dioxide. So you have to keep that in mind when you're doing it. But those are great ways. And then there's these wild things. You ever hear of shungite stones?
Yeah.
Yeah, shungite stones are very cool. They were like buckyballs, like fullerenes. I actually wrote an article on that too. There's 60 carbon spheres, look like a little soccer ball if you looked at it, but they're at a nano level. There's three levels. There's microscopic, there's nano, and then there's molecular, right down to a molecule. So nano are really small, right above molecular level. But these shungite stones are kind of a mystery. They're only in one area in Russia, Karelia, with a K, Karelia. That's the only spot in the whole planet where they are. And they're not sure because it appears that they're very old and before the rise of plant life on Earth. And so most of the things we have, coal, oil, things like that, are all plant life that over time decomposed. These shungite stones, they think they might be for a meteor strike or something, but they're not. They're fascinating. And so you can use those to purify water as well because they have, just like the activated charcoal, they have a huge surface area. And if you, by the way, getting back to activated charcoal, you use that to filter water in a nuclear event, for example, if there was a nuclear explosion or any nuclear bomb or anything that would send off and you were exposed to it and you had to filter stuff, activated charcoal filters 70% of its own weight in radioactive material.
So would you make a slurry and drink it? How would you protect yourself?
No, you would do the same thing I was talking about earlier. You would filter it through those filters, and it would filter out 70% of it. So what I would just do is do it 2 or 3 times, and to make sure that you got everything out. And at least to give you a way to do that. You could also add it to topsoil, and it'll bind up the radioactive material there if you want to clear an area, and then add it and make sure there's nothing residual left that's contaminated. You can use that soil to grow things and rest assured.
Quick question: Can you take it orally? Because I've seen charcoal capsules.
Yes, you can.
Would that help reduce?
Yes. Great question. You can. Yeah. I use activated charcoal a ton in my practice. Patients come in and are nauseous. I give them a capsule of 2 capsules of activated charcoal, a glass of water. I tell them to sit there for a half hour. They can't believe it. It soaks up everything. It's now you have to be careful with activated charcoal for that reason. It'll soak up medications as well. And so you have to take it 2 hours away from a medication. That gives you enough time for your stomach to empty usually, and you're okay. Otherwise, it'll inactivate them. As you know, we use that through NG tubes in the emergency room for overdoses for 100 years, because it binds up everything and it's safe. It's cheap, it's safe, and it works well. That was actually, activated charcoal is what they used in, do you know what life straws are? Mm-hmm. Yeah, life straws are, what an amazing idea. A guy invented this to help people in the third world get clean water. We take it for granted here because we're in a first world country, but the vast majority of the planet struggle to get clean drinking water. And so, there's various ways they do it, and they suffer a lot of childhood diseases with it, diarrhea that kills young kids all the time from parasites and they get in the water and things. And so for that reason, it was incredible. The guy wasn't even a scientist. He was just a guy on a mission who wanted to help the world. And he came up with these life straws, which are great. One straw will filter 264 gallons of water through it. And it removes sediment, bacteria, all parasites. It doesn't remove viruses, but usually viruses aren't that big of a problem in water so much as the other ones. But there's a second iteration of it called family straw, It's a bigger, it's a tub of about maybe a 5-gallon tub. It looks like, and you pour water in the top, and it has Berkey type filters and different things that filter through it. It has a smaller micron size to it, so you can get a quart of water through that in 8 minutes, and it'll be pure, even virus free. And so you get about 3 or 4 5 gallons an hour through it, and it'll last for a few years for a family of 5. And so it's a great thing to have. I mean, it's unbelievable that we have that stuff available now. And they're about $400 online if you wanted to buy one. They're not. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not a killer. It doesn't break the bank if you had to do it. I mean, it will keep your family alive, and so it's a great thing to have if you needed it.
I mean, imagine that versus trying to save all these water bottles. People tend to save them in a case of an emergency.
Right.
But this is a much better way to go about it.
Yeah, and then you got the microplastic problem with the water bottles. They're really poison for you. That BPA and different things, those forever chemicals. These are, talk about horrible things. These are other things that they're allowing us to ingest into our bodies. Huge amounts of these, they call them forever chemicals because the half-life is ridiculously long. Half-life means, for your listeners, is how 50% of something breaks down. So it sounds like if it's a 10-day half-life, in 20 days it's gone. That's not true. In 10 days, you're down 50%. In 10 days more, you're down 25. And it keeps going that way. So it takes a while. But these forever chemicals have half-lives of several hundred years. And so they're affecting our DNA. They're affecting everything. This is unprecedented in human history that we've had this assault on our health from the environment at such an amazing level. I mean, they're hitting us with the foods, the water, the air, the sunlight, everything. It's kind of terrifying when the more and more I come up with these things, I keep thinking, oh God, just something else I've got to worry about.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there any way that you can leach these things out of chelate them out of your system, these microplastics?
No. Right now, there's no known mechanism for you. Some of it's excreted by your kidneys. You'll get some in your kidneys and you'll defecate out some of it. So that 5 grams you're taking in, maybe no one knows for sure. But if you have good kidney function, I would think you might excrete half of it, but that's a pure guess. Either way, the problem is what's left. And the problem is it's going to all of our organs. And they're actually plasticizing our organs. And so it makes cell walls stiff and less responsive. It makes the kidneys filter less. It makes the heart less functional. And now it's in the brain. And you wonder what the long-term effects are because it crosses the blood-brain barrier, which for your listeners is a barrier that the body uses to protect the brain. And so very few things can cross through it into the brain. And nature does that for that reason, to protect the brain. But these are too small. They go right through it.
So imagine all this dementia and Alzheimer's and all these neurological issues that are popping up in younger people. You wonder if this is a sign of that exposure.
Well, unfortunately, young people have adopted really bad health habits. They're sedentary, first of all. I mean, they're ridiculously sedentary. You see 20-year-old men with gynecomastia, they got breasts and handlebars on their belly and stuff, and look at them like, what are you doing? You're 20 years old. You should be a young buck. You should be in great shape, but they sit around all day on their computers. So they have very little exercise. But the biggest factor for that is they're inside. They're inside all day. They don't get any vitamin D. I have young people come in, they have vitamin D levels of 8 and 6, unbelievably low.
That's
And
love.
yeah, Quest it goes up to 30. It tells you 30 is normal. That's nonsense. All functional medicine doctors know that the sweet spot for vitamin D is somewhere around 80. And so you're better off with a high vitamin D level, by far. It protects your immune system, your heart, your bones, your everything. It boosts everything. It's good. We're realizing it's more like a hormone than a vitamin. And it's got so many good effects. But, patients, even with their good intentions, take it wrong because they don't realize that vitamins come in 2 types, fat soluble and water soluble. And soluble means what they dissolve it. And all vitamins are fat soluble, including D, except for vitamin B, all the different Bs, and vitamin C. Those are water soluble. So for those, you always have water in your body. You can take those on an empty stomach. But if you don't take the vitamin D with food, with fat, then you're not going to absorb it. It's going to go right through you. And so, but there's other problems, not problems, there's other challenges with vitamin D because it uh, vitamin D causes calcium absorption. And so you can wind up with a high calcium level, a dangerously high calcium level, if you take vitamin D without vitamin K2. And K2 is another fat soluble vitamin. It was a fascinating story because for decades we were giving menopausal women large doses of calcium. In people with osteoporosis, not menopausal, osteoporotic women, giving them large doses of calcium, hoping it would build their bones. And what do we find? It was going into the blood vessels. And they were getting atherosclerosis or hardening of their arteries and not reaching their bones. And everyone was scratching their heads. Why is this? What's the piece we're missing? And the piece is vitamin K2. And so K2 is, I push K2 on everyone because K2 is so, like vitamin D, is so healthy for you, and you need it with vitamin D. A lot of companies sell it together now, D3 and K2. By the way, the D's come, there's two types of D's. D2 is from plants, D3 is from animals. D3 is way more active. But so you take K2 and D3 together, and you also have to take magnesium because to process vitamin D, you need magnesium. So you need those three things. But once again, if you take them all, it'll actually clean up your blood vessels because the K2 will actually move calcium from your blood vessels to your bones and your teeth. So you'll build stronger teeth, stronger bones, and get rid of the hardening of the arteries that you've built up for years. And so it's fascinating,
It is fascinating.
Yeah, but it's the reason why you need animal fat. Because people eating these really lean meats and stuff, we're not made to do that. We're made to eat from nose to tail on the animal. That's in the old days. That's where they ate them. They made bone broth from the bones. They ate everything, all the organs, everything, and the skin. People eat skinless chicken and fat-free this and fat-free that. It's the mistake of their lifetimes because I see patients come in all the time with eczema and dry skin and nervous system problems, and it's all a vitamin D deficiency. And I tell them, you got to take your vitamin D, and it'll correct this, along with the magnesium and the K2. But if since they are fat soluble, all the vitamins you need from animals, A, D, E, and K, are all in animal fat. And so if you have a diet that's devoid of animal fat, you're starving yourself of all those essential, not essential, but all of the vitamins, and the fat soluble vitamins that you need for your health.
So I
And
have to
so
ask, I have to stop you then. What about vegan diets? It doesn't sound from what you just described that it's a healthy diet.
it's not. It's not a healthy diet. Even vegetarians, it's not a healthy diet. They're lacking those things. They're lacking B vitamins also. A lot of B vitamins in there as well. And so, yeah, those aren't healthy diets. I mean, they sound great, and it sounds great to have a plant-based diet, but it's really not healthy. And in fact, if you look, there was a guy named Weston Price. It was fascinating. He was a dentist, and I think he was from Chicago. They have the Weston Price Foundation now. It's still working. It does great work. But what he did was he noticed that immigrants had better teeth than Americans. And he was perplexed about that. And then he also realized that it was nothing genetic because second generation or even brothers within the same family or sisters, once they migrated to the States and adopted an American diet, you know, had problems with their teeth. They also had small, crowded faces. They had overbites. They didn't have square jaws. And so he traveled the world at his own expense and went to primitive societies everywhere in the 1930s. Africa, Asia, Iceland, any place, you know, Siberia, all these places there were isolated tribes. And what he found was a couple things. They all ate fermented foods, all those societies, and they all ate a lot of animal fat. And so he didn't know what it was at the time in the animal fat. He called it X factor. And later on, they realized what it was. And so he realized that your jaw development, which depends on a few things, it depends on the diet that you eat as far as nutrition, but also the consistency of the foods. We unfortunately have our children eat the softest foods available, baby food, when they're infants, but as they get, even when they're children, a lot of soft food where they don't have to chew a lot. And what happens is a guy wrote a great book called, I think it was called Jaws. A dentist wrote this about facial development. The mastication, the chewing of tough meat and different things like that is natural, and it leads to facial structure. So you wind up, these people from primitive societies wind up with square jaws and big shining smiles of no rotten teeth, and were in pretty good health compared to Americans who adopted this diet that was devoid of the things they needed, and they were eating a lot of soft foods, thinking they were doing themselves a favor when they weren't.
It's amazing how our system is so rigid in terms of pronouncements of what healthy is. And they push people into all these silos, let's say fluoride, for example, and dentists giving fluoride treatments to children. And I've had these conversations with dentists, for example, and if, just common sense would say, right, if fluoride actually worked, there would never be any cavities to fill. And that's not what's going on, yet people
Right.
just keep doing the same thing and not paying any attention to the outcome.
I wrote an article on fluoride in my Substack about a month ago. Fluoride lowers IQs big time. And so what I advise my patients to do is not use fluoridated toothpastes. There's two things you want in a toothpaste. One's called a hydroxyapatite, and the other one's xylitol. And I buy toothpaste with those two things in them, because the theory of the dentist was that fluoride would bond with the enamel on your tooth and make it stronger and make it prevent cavities. Well, it didn't. It didn't do that. Just like you said, there would be no cavities if that was the case. And hydroxyapatite bonds 28 times stronger to the enamel than fluoride does and has no side effects. It's natural, your body's used to it. And if you use xylitol with that, xylitol is a sugar that bacteria cannot ferment in your mouth. It actually is toxic for bacteria, the exact bacteria that cause cavities. And so I use toothpaste made with hydroxyapatite and xylitol. And those two things, and especially if you brush your teeth with them and leave it on for a few minutes and then rinse your mouth out. I mean, the big stuff you can spit out, but later on, don't do a good rinsing of your mouth. Give it like 10 minutes to bond with your tooth. But that's a great way to do it. And like I said, it lowers IQs. It's a disaster. And so I don't know why the government keeps pushing this. It's Robert Kennedy, to his credit, is against that as well. And so same thing with the vaccinations. We're giving 47 vaccines to children. Are you nuts? All of the material in it is so toxic that they put adding to it. And we're giving it to these young kids and it's not even a perfect immunity. As you know, natural immunity is much stronger. It's lifelong and it's lasting and it doesn't wane. So, I went to kindergarten in 1959 and caught everything. I had mumps, measles, and chickenpox in the same year,
In 1 year, oh my God.
along with most of my class. It didn't kill us. In fact, it made you stronger. For a while in the 80s, they were doing this. They were having parties. One kid remember? One kid would get chickenpox, invite them all over. That was the smartest thing to do. That was way better than these injections. This is, just like RSV, another vaccine in search of a virus. Most people 92% of people by the time you're 3 years old have antibodies to RSV because they've been exposed to it. It's not a big killer, but the pharmaceutical companies know that vaccines are a gold rush. And the more they can vaccinate us, the more they'll do. And it upsets me to no end that the pediatricians don't fight back and say, no, this is way too many. And
that's the whole purpose of what you do, though, because you're a thinking doctor, and that's the whole functional medicine. And I got to stop you for a second. Do you think that people are now, the pendulum is swinging back, that they're looking for people, doctors like yourself, who are thinkers, critical thinkers, who know their physiology? People are tired of being, taking all sorts of meds and they're not healthy. Do you think that we can see a golden age, so to speak, of people withdrawing their consent from the system?
I hope so. You're right. It's always a pendulum. It seems to be swinging back a little bit. There's great interest in functional medicine, like you said. The problem is there's so few of us. We're self-taught for the most part. In fact, we're totally self-taught. There's no courses. You can't take a course in functional medicine. There's not, and so I spent 40 years easy 40 years, maybe 50 years, reading countless books on alternative ways. And I was shocked when I was in medical school. So I went to medical school in Europe, in Italy, and they were very much into nutrition. We had a lot of nutrition courses and stuff. And when I got back to the United States to do my residency, I was always shocked by there was complete avoidance of anything nutritional. They never brought it up. They never used vitamins. They never used minerals. And it seemed to me that they were dropping the ball. I kept asking questions about it, and they would shut down every time. Like, shut up, intern. Do your shit. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. We don't want to hear from you. You know.
Oh, see, now you've got your own practice, and you do what you want to do.
Right.
I just want to applaud you for that, because you and I both know how the system has been and what it is now. It's a gauntlet at this point. And you
Yes.
can choose, and I'm just proud to call you my friend, that you've chosen patient care, and you've chosen to do what you were put on this earth to do, and you're not going to be intimidated by anybody. And I love that.
I appreciate that's very kind of you.
On that note, let's take our last break and come back. You're living in the solution. In the couple minutes that we have left, I want to go back to water for a minute and dehydration. What are the signs of dehydration?
Well, the first sign is thirst, but it depends on your age. Like I said, the thirst mechanism declines with age, so you don't feel it when you're above 60. It rapidly declines. So that's not reliable for the elderly. That's why they're all dehydrated. The second sign is fatigue, because just remember the old car batteries? You used to have to add water to them. To generate power, your body needs water. And with a lack of water, it gets sluggish, you get tired, sometimes you get myalgias, muscle aches, and fatigue, and nothing works well. All of your organs, are dependent on getting rid of waste products. And if you have buildup of waste products in your body, it leads to sluggishness, leads to GI problems at times. But all this isn't by itself. There's a lot of leaky gut syndrome, a ton of it, which really affects their bacteria in their guts are terrible. We're the only society on earth that doesn't eat fermented foods as a tradition. And we have a little sauerkraut maybe once in a while with a little yogurt, but it's not part of the American diet for the most part. And that's a real mistake, because fermentation pre-digests the food. It makes it more nutritionally content, and it releases it for you. Plus, it has tons of probiotics, which your gut needs. Your gut's your second brain. I mean, it controls a lot of what goes on in your body and how you feel. And so there's problems with that. There's problems with seed oils. Seed oils are a disaster. We've got away from using butter, beef tallow, lard. Lard's got a terrible name. It doesn't warrant it. It's great for you. Those saturated fats that they told us before were terrible. They've come around finally themselves and said, okay, we were wrong about the saturated fat thing. They pushed. My mother was reading. She didn't know she was a high school dropout. She was very well read, and she read what the hell's the name of that magazine? I forgot the name of it. There was a health magazine at the time that she read, and she would force us to eat margarine instead of butter because they were pushing it at the time. Some of the things were so misguided, but her intentions were good, but it just didn't work out. But right now, seed oils contain omega-6 fatty acids. There's two kinds of fatty acids that we need: omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-3, like fish oil, great for you and stuff. It's anti-inflammatory. It boosts your immune system. It helps your brain, your heart, your organs. Everything your body needs is in omega-3s. Your brain is a large amount made of omega-3s. Omega-6s you still need, but you need a lot less of them. And traditionally, our diets were either 2-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3, or 3-to-1, or sometimes 1-to-1, depending on the amount of fish they ate and stuff. Now it's 20-to-1, favoring omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory. So you wind up with a lot of chronic diseases, and a guy did an interesting study, and I forget his name. I just was reading it the other day. It was fascinating. He looked back. He was a public health expert, a physician. He looked back over the last 100 years and so, and he went from 1922 to 1987. He took that period. And he realized, amazingly, that Americans have a lot of sugar in their diet, but we've had that since the 1910s, 1920s. That hasn't changed. Sugar content, which shocked me, has only gone up 2% over that entire time. What has gone up several thousand% is omega-6s and seed oils and the toxins. They cause mitochondrial dysfunction. So the mitochondria don't work. And when the mitochondria don't work, you can't develop energy, so you get fatigued. And your body, all the processes that your body needs aren't there. You can't do it. And so that lack of mitochondrial function led to obesity and diabetes. And it matches exactly with seed oils as you go up. And so you really have to be cognizant of avoiding all of them. Soy, sunflower, canola oil, all of those. They're all terrible for you. Olive oil it's not really seed oils from fruit. It's not from the fruit of the plant, not the seed. And so, those things, if you can eliminate them from your diet as much as you can, and it's hard to do because they're cheap to use. McDonald's used to use lard up until the 1970s. And then they switched over to cheaper corn oil and things like that, which are horrible for you. And so if we get back to that, that will do a lot. And one of the things Kennedy's working on is that as well. That Make America Healthy Again, trying to get away from the seed oils, all the processed foods, get all the chemicals out, stop the vaccinations, all great stuff that we need to do. And I think the public is yearning for that, like you said. They just have to have someone lead them out of the wilderness.
From your lips to the people out there, to their ears. Time goes way too fast, but I want to make sure people know how to read your Substacks.
Yeah, well, the best way is go to medicalunderground@substack.com. And you go there and you can register there, and then you'll get my articles every week. And you can look back through the archives. I've been writing, there's about 100 articles on there, I think, something to that effect. I've been doing this since March of 23. I haven't sat down and counted them, but whatever. There's a lot of articles and a lot of subjects. It's written in a very patient-friendly manner. Any terms I use, medical terms, I put in parentheses what it means right after it. So you don't have to sit there and, I could easily lose you in technical jargon. What would be the point? And if I go into something that's too technical, I'll say, kinky fact, nerd food. And I'll say, this section you can avoid if you don't like science, and skip down to the next section. But I feel like I need to include that each week when I write the articles.
I just love what you do. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. LaGuardia. I can't wait to have you back on. This is like, again, we're just scratching the surface, but it should be a series because everything that you've told us today is things that people can put into action to help themselves. And God bless you for that.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for living in the solution.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Liberty Talk FM.